Hi, and welcome to the Cybercrime Essentials course. My name is John Clay, Director of Global Threat Communications here at TrendMicro. And today we want to help you, the seller, understand cybercrime. So being able to help you educate your customers, particularly those early in that buying cycle, that's the cybercrime knowledge will be really good for you during all stages of the buyer's journey. And today I really want to help you understand the threat landscape and some of the key threat vectors that we're seeing on a regular basis. So let's get started. First, I want to talk about the actors and their motivations. So who's committing attacks today against our customers? And it really is a myriad of folks, whether it's cyber criminals. These are the people that are just in it for the profit, looking for ways. You see a lot of ransomware actors as cyber criminals, but the motivation here is about profit. You have insider threats. These are the folks that are in the inside and doing malicious things. Very, very difficult to detect. Probably the hardest one to detect out of all of these. Amateurs and script kiddies. These are the newbies in cybercrime or into hacking. They just want to try out their new skills. There's a lot of tutorials on the undergrounds to help these people. Cybercrime today and hacking today is very easy to get into. All it requires really is a computer, an internet connection, and some cash to be able to pay for services that are offered in the underground. Competitive spies. A lot of people don't realize that there are organizations out there that are in industries that are very competitive. And so they can hire hackers to go in and target their competitors, whether it's to steal their information or to potentially do denial of service attacks against their web properties. Hacktivists, a lot of hacktivists out there, especially with the political environment we're in today around the world. We see a lot of hacktivists going out there and doing destructive attacks, whether it's website defacements, whether it's denial of service attacks, etc. And then finally, nation states, and these are the toughest one of the toughest ones to deal with. Not everybody's going to be targeted with this type of a actor, but certainly if you're in government, if you're in the defense industry, you're more than likely going to be targeted with nation state actors. But all of these are the different types of threat actors, the attackers that are targeting our customers. And any one of these could be targeting them at any given time. So organizations really have to understand who could be attacking them and what is the motivation for these attacks. So we talked a little bit about there. Verizon every year does their data breach investigation report, and in 2017, which is their 10th edition one, they found who's committing the attacks. 75% of them are perpetrated by outsiders. These are the hackers outside the organization. So in 75% of the time, it's going to be from the outside, but 25% is going to involve those internal actors. And as I said, those internal actors are going to be very difficult because these people have the credentials to get into your environment. They understand your environment very well because they work there. 18% conducted by state-affiliated actors. That's those nation-state folks. And then 51% involved organized criminal groups. These are the cyber criminal groups. These organized syndicates, they all have them. Even the drug syndicates, they all have cyber arms now because it is so profitable for organizations out there. So a lot of criminal groups are involved in cybercrime now, and you can see over 50% are committing attacks today. So what are some of the motivations for these actors? First, again, espionage. If I can go into an organization, I can steal intellectual property. Maybe I'm bringing it back to my country to help improve some of the areas that I'm somewhat weak in. I could be going after a competitor. This is where you see a lot of data stealing, data theft, etc. Financial gain is one of the biggest motivators. These actors really want to make money. They want to be able to take their financial gains and go do things. And if you think about the world as a whole today, if I live in a let's say a West African country, I don't need a lot of money to make a good living. So you get these actors now coming from a lot of the poorer countries that have access. West Africa, for example, has very good internet access. So if I can go and I can run a business email compromise scam against a Western organization and I could profit $30,000 or $50,000, I've just made a lot of money in my to spend in my region. So financial gain is a big motivator. And then disruption is another one. And this is it, and we're seeing more and more of it, especially as we start getting into critical infrastructure. We've seen in the past a lot of proof of concepts on critical infrastructure where the criminals behind it were looking to see what they could do. We're starting to see them now evolve into actually doing disruptive attacks, trying to take down critical infrastructure, trying to take down manufacturing systems, banking systems, etc., to disrupt the organization. So these are some of the different motivations that the criminals have today. So let's move on to the threat landscape update. I like to use this World Economic Forum chart. Every year they do the global risk landscape. And you can see here in the upper right, this is the upper right quadrant, so to speak, of the report. But you can see that data fraud and theft and cyber attacks are up in that and very far to the right. So the likelihood is very high, 5.6, 5.5 out of a 6.0. And the impact is pretty high as well, 3.3, 3.5 respectively on the impact scale. So, and you can see where they are placed in here. We're close to terrorist attacks. We're close to natural disasters, man-made environmental disasters. These are things that affect the globe. So cybercrime, cyber in general is becoming a big problem around the world and regions and countries and these groups are starting to deal and feel the impact of them. If you look at the threat landscape evolution, we've been tracking this for many, many years. You know, TrendMicro's been in business for almost 30 years now, and we've been tracking what the threat types. And this is what this really tells you is that threat actors are constantly evolving, right? And that's why TrendMicro, we've had to evolve our protections as well. So you can go starting out in 2001, for example, with worm outbreaks and vulnerabilities, all the way up through 2016, where we started to see a lot more business email compromise, and all of the things in between, whether it's intelligent botnets, web threats, targeted attacks, mobile attacks, destructive attacks, and ransomware. You know, again, the threat actors out there are regularly looking for new ways to target their victims and ways to profit from those victims. Let's talk about ransomware. And I'm going to cover just a couple of the key threats that we see on a regular basis out there. Ransomware is by far the biggest one. It has leveled off. 2016 was really a massive increase in the amount of crypto ransomware that we saw out there. But you can see here now, the average number of new ransomware families in the first half of 2017 was the same as in the second half of 2016, which was about 28. Still a very significant number. 28 new ransomware families are being developed and launched by the threat actors out there every month. So that's still a significant amount of them. And you can see here in a different chart, you can see from 2015, where we had only 29 families in total for all of 2015, 79 were in the first half of 2016, 167 in the second half. You can see in the first half of 2017, 168 new families and variants of old ones that still have to be detected as new came out, and we'll see what happens in the second half. It's probably going to be a similar number. And one area, as I mentioned, they're constantly evolving, the threat actors, right? And one area is mobile. You saw on the threat landscape chart that mobile was an area. And in the first half of 2017, you can see we discovered unique mobile ransomware sourced by our mobile app reputation service. 234,000 malicious ransomware apps were sourced by our mobile app reputation service in there. You can see it had the highest in the month of March of 2017 at 56,000. So significant number of mobile ransomware apps that are being propagated out there. The criminals are seeing mobile as a way to get after new victims, right? It's another attack source that they can take advantage of. So ransomware definitely is going to continue to be a problem. They are also diversifying into some of the new attack methods. As I've said, for Petya, for example, that's the big one. WannaCry and Petya this year utilized third-party application to update to an update process to infect an organization. They used Eternal Blue was the vulnerability exploit that they used to infect a lot of systems out there. So they're definitely going to be looking at new ways to infect organizations. Cerber, for example, added avoiding detection of pre-execution machine learning. So they're constantly looking at how are the security vendors detecting my malware, and can I write obfuscation techniques into here? We know that machine learning has been built a lot now to detect malware. Well, they're starting to write anti-evasion or an evasion technology into their code to evade pre-execution machine learning. And then SLocker, which is a mobile one that encrypted files rather than locking the screen on the mobile device. So again, moving to the mobile platform. If we look at the infection vectors of ransomware, it's still pretty consistent. Email is by far the #1 vector to get ransomware into an organization. 67% from our data is tied to malicious emails with either a malicious attachment or an embedded URL. 29% are tied to malicious websites. So again, the web is a big piece, and 4% are actual ransomware files. So if you look at where we're protecting our customers the most, it really is looking at the email gateway, looking at the web gateway. That's where we're blocking the majority of the ransomware for our customers. And that's the best place to block ransomware, is at the source. Let's not wait until the files actually get installed or try to get installed on the endpoint or try to run on the endpoint. That's the worst place to detect it. Shifting now to the next threat, business email compromise. This is a huge threat that the FBI, if you can see here, the FBI has been tracking it since 2013. And you can see in 32 months it took to get to just over $3 billion in losses. But in 7 months, it went from $3 billion to over $5 billion. So you can see that the threat actors are kicking in and really launching a lot of attacks with business email compromise. Part of the reason why is if you look at the FBI statistics, the average amount of a business email compromise loss is about $140,000. Compared to that to ransomware, where it's maybe $5,000. If my ROI is $140,000 versus $5,000, what am I going to do? I'm going to do the business email compromise. And part of it is you can see here the Special Agent Roberts from the FBI said the payoff is so large compared to most online scams because they're not targeting individuals, but medium to large companies. So our customers are being targeted for sure. Small business is affected. So don't think you're immune if you're a small business. Medium to large, though, is kind of the sweet spot. These are where these organizations, these criminals, can really target these companies to get a lot of money transferred out. If you look at the different types of business email compromise, the first and foremost, the biggest one is the CEO fraud. This is where the cyber criminal is going to pose as a company executive, typically the CEO, and they're going to send an email to the finance, somebody in finance, and ask them to wire transfer funds from their account to the cyber criminal account. And even though it sounds simple, it is, but it's working. So you have a couple of different types of CEO fraud, where the reply to who the from is kind of a general name, so it'd be like CEO, or more in the second area is where it's more specific, where it could be like John Smith, who's the CEO of ABC.com, and they'll use John Smith at AEC. So they'll do a domain that looks very similar to the company's domain as the reply to. The second area that we see a lot of it is supplier swindle. This is where the criminal is going to compromise an employee email. That compromised account is used to send notifications to the suppliers of this company, and then payments are made from that company to the cyber criminal account. So this supplier swindle one is getting big. We saw a couple of instances this year of some very large organizations that got caught up with supplier swindle and lost a significant amount of money. Data theft is another area that's starting to pick up. This is where the criminal is going to compromise, and again, typically an executive email, and then they're going to send an email to HR, for example, and ask for W-2 account data of the employees. And so they'll send that, and then they'll be able to do actions against those employees. And the last one is attorney impersonation. So a lot of organizations have lawyers, and they have third-party lawyer firms, and they're going to pose as a lawyer and email finance person, again, doing finance to send money to the criminal. So these are the different types of BEC. When we look at the CEO fraud, the most spoofed positions, means that who the email is coming from. Chief Executive Officer, CEO, is the number one, but you're going to see Managing Director, President, General Manager, Chairman. Those are all going to be utilized. And then the most targeted position, these are the people typically, again, in finance, you're going to see. So the CFO is the most targeted, next with Director of Finance, Finance Manager, Finance Controller, Accountant, etc., coming into play. So that's how that CEO fraud is going to look. When we looked in November and looked at all the BEC attacks against our TrendMicro customers, the regions that we're seeing the most you can see here, is that the US, Europe, and Australia are the top three, with UK and Great Britain being in there. So Australia's got a lot, big one, and the US, obviously, a lot of finance done in the US, a lot of organizations that they can target in the US. So that's business email compromise. Now we need to talk about vulnerabilities and exploits. This is an area that we're seeing a lot of threat actors taking advantage of. The good news is, when we looked at our zero-day initiative data in the first half of 2017 from the second half of 2016, Google, Apple, and Microsoft all had less vulnerabilities disclosed during that period of time. So that's good news. But you can see Adobe still had an increase, Fox IT had an increase. But these criminals are going to be utilizing these major vendors, either applications or operating systems to target. And when we look at the biggest vulnerability of 2017, this was the Eternal Blue that was released by the shadow brokers. It was a security patch for CVE 2017-0144. This is the one that was used for WannaCry and Petya. Both of those ransomware attacks were using this Eternal Blue vulnerability that was released by shadow brokers. And that's the challenge that organizations are going to have. So very quickly, when a vulnerability is disclosed, and the good thing is Microsoft actually released this security patch in March. You can see here, right? And the actors released their exploit in April, and then in May, WannaCry hit, and then in June, Petya hit. So most organizations hopefully should have been protected, but they weren't. You can see here, and where a lot of the organization, or a lot of the systems that weren't protected, you can see here, there's medical devices, there's ATMs, there's billboards. Typically, these are the types of devices that don't get a lot of patches. Either they have embedded OS, or they have old operating systems that are running, and they were very hit by these because organizations have a very difficult time patching these types of systems. Also, if you look at the biggest breach in 2017, which was the Equifax breach, US CERT back in March disclosed the vulnerability, and Apache actually released a security patch for the Apache Struts vulnerability. That's what they used to access the data. The breach was discovered in July, and the public disclosure of the breach by Equifax was in September. Again, a vulnerability that was patched was used to get inside an organization, to infect an organization and compromise an organization and get in there. So organizations really, people have to look at the patch management process. Virtual patching with our tipping point, our deep security, our Office Scan vulnerability patching, critical technology to detect these, especially if you think about those devices that I mentioned before, those ATMs, the medical devices, the billboards. Those all are probably running on a network where tipping point, which doesn't require an agent on those systems, but can protect them through network IPS technology and virtual patching across the network. And the big thing that a lot of people think about is they think, oh, these criminals are using zero-day exploits on a regular basis. But the common thing is no 0 days are used against the weakest links. So when you think about it, the vulnerability, the window of availability when that vulnerability is disclosed to when the patches are released, that's where you can use virtual patching to minimize that risk and that exposure, that window of exposure. So organizations can look at that. The patch management needs to be dealt with, but it's getting difficult, more and more difficult for organizations to manage the many patches that are coming for all of their applications, all of their operating systems that they're running. Now I want to talk about targeted attacks, and this is an interesting area because if you think about a lot of the attacks, all use a similar format. So the criminals in the underground have realized that that using an attack stage process really helps them improve their chances of infecting an organization. So there's a number of stages that goes through, from intelligence gathering to point of entry, command and control, lateral movement, asset data discovery, and data exfiltration. These are really the links in the attack chain that a criminal is going to take when they do a targeted attack. So let's talk a little bit about each of these. So in the intelligence gathering stage, this is where they're going to try and acquire a lot of information about the organization and about who they want to target. So they're going to look at social media. They're going to look at LinkedIn for the employees of an account. They're going to look in LinkedIn to find out who all is in finance, because you're going to put finance in your LinkedIn account. They're going to look at Facebook. They're going to look at the different social media activities. They're also going to start looking at what the IT environment looks like inside that organization. What are they running? What technology are they running in there? A lot of organizations, for example, you get an email and it'll tell you what email service is using to scan. Then they can target that email service with a vulnerability or an exploit. So the intelligence gathering is key. This is where they decide who they want to target, why they want to target them, how they want to target them, and then and then they will do the point of entry, right? And that's how they gain entry into the target network. Typically, as I said, just like with ransomware, email is going to be the first one. They're going to phish your employees, and they're not going to phish the employees that are in IT or know about security. They're going to target your shipping and receiving organization. They're going to target your HR organization. They're going to target your finance people. They're going to target a lot of the individuals inside your organization who don't have a lot of security knowledge and may not, and then are busy people. They're going to be looking at their emails regularly. They got a lot of emails to scrub through, and they're hoping to get that infected. They're going to use weaponized attachments or embedded URLs, but they're also going to look for weaknesses in your infrastructure, in your systems, your applications, your third-party organizations, right? We've seen a lot of third-party organizations be targeted just to get access to the organizations they have access to their networks. So a lot of places that they can go. The challenge that a lot of organizations is that these guys can be patient. They can launch many different attacks. If one doesn't work, they'll try something new. If they do establish a beachhead, and typically it's going to be some employees at a machine, then they're going to put in command and control communications. This is how they can continue communicating between themselves and the organization. So this command and control communications process, usually they're going to use HTTP, but they could also use third-party apps. They could use, we've seen cloud storage devices, public cloud utilized it this way. But this really is where they can maintain persistence inside an organization. And TrendMicro has command and control research. We specifically look for command and control servers out there. We specifically look at who's getting attacked, who has been attacked, who is connecting to those command and control servers. And so that really helps us identify, and organizations that can implement this through our web reputation technology can identify if they've been breached by just identifying command and control. Stage 4 is really lateral movement. Again, if I get inside an organization through an employee's machine, typically that machine's not going to have the data that they want to steal or do things that have access to the network area that they want to get. So they need to laterally move. This is where the most often they're going to try to steal credentials of your administrators. So if I can steal the credentials of the administrator, then I can get access to any of the machines or networks that that administrator has. But you're also going to see passing the hash. You're going to see brute force login attempts regularly, and usually with default passwords, username and passwords. So hopefully organizations have changed those on a regular basis. But the lateral movement is key to them. Typically, it's going to be going towards the data center. That's where they want to get to, because that's where all the good data, the customer data, the employee data, your intellectual property are all going to be housed in your data centers. Once I discover the data, right, that's the next step. Is if I laterally move to the right area, then I need to discover the data that I want to steal, right? Typically, it's going to be in a database somewhere. Again, I got to steal the credentials of that database administrator so I can get access to it. And if you look at what types of data are at risk, this is where a lot of organizations, especially small businesses, they may go, I don't have anything of value for an attacker, hence I will not be attacked. But there's a lot of different data at risk. First is corporate and financial, right? You think about board meeting records, legal proceedings, purchase agreements, pre-earnings announcements. If I want to short or long a stock, I'm going to get pre-earnings announcements to help me in that area. M&A plans, patent pending filings, etc. Manufacturing, this is where in intellectual property manufacturing methods, you see a lot of this going on, especially for some of these countries that may have weak manufacturing. Why am I going to build it and try and learn it? I'll just go steal it and utilize that information to build my own manufacturing plans. Retail, financial records transactions, customer profiles generate revenue for identity theft and stuff. So a lot of stuff in retail, we see a lot of POS malware, point of sale malware to steal credit card data. And then internal organizational data, employee records, health claims, identity insurance fraud. So a lot of that, we talked about that business email compromise scam where they look for W-2 records. So that, but even from this, just looking for systems to use, a lot of criminals want to launch denial of service attacks outside on other organizations. What better way than to go and compromise a bunch of machines inside an organization and use those to access the internet and get out there. That helps obfuscate their tracks. And the other stage is data exfiltration. So once I've found the data, typically I'm going to encrypt it, and then I'm going to exfiltrate it outside the organization. Sometimes you'll see that through FTP, HTTP. We see Tor used a lot. Public file sharing sites are used a lot. Email, FTP, all of these can be used to exfiltrate. And they're not going to dump it all out at one time. They're going to trickle it out so you can't see that data leak is very difficult to detect. And the last stage really is a maintenance stage. This is where they look to maintain persistence in the network. So they put themselves on sleep cycles. They're going to erase all aspects of it. They're going to erase the tracks. We even see malware where when it gets on a system, it will actually patch the system for that organization. If it used an exploit to get on, they'll patch the vulnerability that's associated with exploit because they have access now. But this is where they just want to lay low, stay in the network, and for further use later in time. Or they may sell access to other cyber criminals for profit. So those are the key threats. So the last thing I wanted to highlight is just where can you find more information about the threats and the activities of the threat actors. So the first one really is going on our TrendMicro.com website. If you go to the intelligence section of the website, click on intelligence, and that's where you're going to go to see the breaking security news and intelligence. You can get access to our to like all of our blogs. So our security intelligence blog is really our technical blog. So if you want to learn about technical aspects of an attack or the technical aspects of a specific malware, go to security intelligence blog and you can get that. We regularly blog about the latest threats that are affecting organizations. We also have our security news section. That's more industry-related stuff. And then Simply Security, which is the TrendMicro formal blog, blog.trendmicro.com. There's a lot of information there. We do also a lot of threat information there. You can also find research and reports under that intelligence section. So If you want to read about the latest threat, you want to read about the deep web, you want to read about IoT, Internet of Things, or vulnerabilities, we have our security reports, our annual predictions reports are all available in that section of the website. We also have an internal newsletter, TrendMicro newsletter for employees. And if you're interested in getting access, this is a monthly newsletter from Trend Labs, who produces a lot of the content we have. Contact Mila Palau. She can add you to that distribution list. And with that, I want to say thank you very much and good luck on your test. Hopefully this was helpful. Have a good day. Bye-bye.